Today's lesson is going to be, I think, quite easy. So according to what you marked in this initial feedback form, not feedback form, but yeah, the feedback form that assesses your level when the course started. So this is not going to bring anything new to many people. It's going to be quite simple, but then again, there were a few that had some difficulties there, so I will talk about it. Before we start to talk about server-side APIs, we need to know what the server is and how you talk to it. So, server is just some computer, some kind of system that is somewhere, and usually accessible through internet or intranet or some cable or whatever. And it's called the server because when you are a client and you ask it something, it gives whatever you are asking it. And talking to the server is done using this HTTP. So HTTP stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol. Key word here is text. Now, there are two methods to send this text to server and to get results from the server back to you. Usually, there are these HTTP request types, the GET request type and the POST request type. Each of these has some kind of pros and cons. I think that maybe instead of just talking about these, I could put them here on the slide and maybe I ask you, what do you know about them? Have you ever used HTTP requests in your programming?
Yeah.
Okay. So what's the difference between GET requests and POST requests?
GET request just get a query string with URL.
Yeah. So
POST request just hidden.
okay. So one of the things is that GET request is part of the URL.
Yeah.
You send at the end of the URL, like maybe your URL is something like, and then something here and PHP script or similar, and then maybe Json.
Question mark. Yeah. And variable name is equal to this and.
Okay, so something like that.
Yeah.
Something like that. Somebody said Json. We will get to that.
Yeah.
We will get to that soon. It's something else. But the problem with this is that if you do it, people see my password.
No.
I mean, in this example here, where I'm telling the server I want to log in with my name and with my password, somebody who would be next to me would see there in the URL. Aha. So that's.
We can encrypt.
Well, you could encrypt it, but usually it's not that. Usually encryption of password is done on the server side, but what is happening is that while sending the information, it uses a secure layer, this HTTPS, which cannot be interfered with. But actually the solution is to use the POST. So when you're dealing with sensitive data, you don't want to use the GET request because people can actually visually see it there.
Google still using that method.
I'm sorry?
Google still using get method.
Oh, you can and should use GET methods sometimes.
Yeah.
Because they can be cached. So if you're going to ask the server for something very, very complicated, HTTP, something, PHP, give me the answer to the meaning of the universe or whatever, and this one calculates in half an hour. But then when you load it again, your browser can cache the result and it loads in a second. It doesn't have to redo the request necessarily. So these are some kind of advantages for the GET request and a reason why it still exists nowadays. I can also copy the link and send it to somebody. When you go to some
search something on Google and the whole link here and you can copy it and send it.
So basically, I think GET is to retrieve the data, which is public information. So when we type any information in Google search, so that's public. We don't type. It's not the case like we type password in the Google search bar.
Public, not public, this is a little bit debatable here because if you remember our VVD course, for preparing for the exam, we actually have a similar kind of thing here, part of the URLs. First thing of what this URL contains is maybe it contains a get parameter that tells you what time should the video be started. So then the video doesn't start in the beginning. Public information, everything is fine, but this URL may not actually be public information because unlisted videos on YouTube still can be shared by URL. So if you think about it like that, if I'm watching an unlisted video on YouTube, which just means it's public for anybody with the link, okay, so it's not a private video, but I have to share with a link specifically, then somebody looking from behind the shoulder can look there in the URL, mark it down, and they can get access to an otherwise not public video. So in general, GET is for public data, but there are some sort of exceptions that are tolerable, like in this case. Okay. But yes, so you made good points. It's usually used to retrieve data, and it's usually used when public information is there. Okay. Anything else? Any other things that somebody wants to share about GET and POST? Any questions about it? This thing here, have you ever experienced this problem? I mean, the other one actually has them, but the text here is very bad. So if you want to send too many parameters via GET request, okay, it can happen very much, very, very often. Just many conditions here, or maybe your URL, your username is very long.
But if we use some kind of special characters as well, then there are restrictions in URL. So
that is good reason as well. So not just the length restrictions, but
a special character. Because
usually there is such a thing as URL encoding. So special characters could be encoded in some special way before sending them in the URL, and it could work. But complications happen. Anyway, this has no length restrictions unless server imposes them. So it could be that the server does not allow unlimited size of the request for various reasons. It could be some setting there, but in general it has not. So also some benefit for this POST request. In general, I advise use POST rather than GET to somehow not have surprises. but and because the benefits from the GET, like this caching or sharing of the link or whatever, they happen quite. I mean, you don't have to use them as much as the POST request nowadays. It used to be more used in the past when people were sharing links more, but nowadays sharing is done by social media or by other ways. People rarely do what I do and copy a link and paste it on some page. They just publish it in different places. So in general, I would advise use this because it's more secure and yeah. Okay. Now Json. Yes, so Json. Who knows what Json is?
JavaScript object notation.
Sorry?
JavaScript object notation.
Yeah, I'm surprised somebody knows the acronym.
It's basically any object in JavaScript we define.
Okay.
So if we define an object with x, y parameters, that could be also considered as JSON.
Okay, yes. So JSON, it is a way of representing objects in JavaScript, but it's a standard format. So you can use JSON in PHP, you can use JSON in Java, you can use JSON in C or whatever. So the fact that it has JavaScript in the name, it doesn't mean that it is just something that works in JavaScript.
Yeah.
This is something that some people may have a confusion about. Okay, so it's actually a standard, and it's a way of representing data as text, really, because that's how the standard is going to be achieved. So objects serialized from JavaScript may not look the same as objects serialized from C, but if you serialize in JSON format, they will look exactly the same. So it is used to represent different types of data and even complicated data structures, objects, like what you said. You can use it to represent objects, arrays, strings, Boolean values, and numbers, and it even supports this null type. It's easy to read, kind of. It's possible to read it. If you use the default serialization methods in typical languages, usually they output some kind of binary file, ones and zeros. If you try to open it in Notepad or something, you will see gibberish. But this one is somewhat readable. So here you have some kind of data. I forgot what this is. Yeah. Anyway, we will investigate this a little bit more. It's easier to read if we use this kind of parser. So there are quite many of these if you Google or search the web for JSON parsers. I use this one, which I presume is French because it ends with FR, but I don't know. If I paste this text in it, then it looks a little bit nicer here. It looks a little bit nicer. It has a tree structure. So it begins here with the root node. Okay, two of the attributes here are actually objects again. Not really. This one is an object. You see, it's an object because it has this curly brace here. So objects are inside of curly braces. And this one here is a different thing. It's an array. Objects have again attributes or keys, depends on terminology, but arrays just have an enumeration of different things. They can be different data types or whatever, but they don't need to have specified keys here. One issue that is happening sometimes is people using objects instead of arrays and having surprises. For example, you could have an object that looks something like this. So it looks very much like this close array from here, but some things will not work. Like if you try to use the push or pop operations on an object created from this, you will have surprises. It probably will not work. I think it may even give some error. Not sure, I've never tried, but other things can also happen, like if you try to remove an element from the middle, then you would assume that array collapses or something, depending on the method you use. Here, maybe it's just gonna put null inside it, or yeah. So make sure you know what you are, what you need, and don't use this kind of thing if you just need to use an array. Okay, now we have seen multiple times this console here on the right, and we can in fact use it to type JSON directly, or to define objects directly, like you said before. So for instance, if I paste this same thing in the console as before, I'm going to have an object that has all the properties that I just pasted, even though what I pasted here was initially text. If I would have wanted to have actual text here, I would need to put it in these quotations, but the problem is JSON contains double quotes as part of the attribute names and part of the string definitions there. JavaScript happens to have a very nice trick that you can use simple quotes instead for this. So now this would be represented as a string, but other languages would need you to escape to do a backslash before the double quotes if you want it to be treated as a double quote instead. So all of the string would need to be checked for it and replaced. But if I do this now, then, okay, sorry. If I do this now and I say here, yeah, sorry, there was a new line before the string terminated. Then I just have a variable s, which is the string contained by this. And you have two functions native in JavaScript that can be used to convert JSON string into JSON text and vice versa. I think they have JSON parse, so I'm going to parse S, and you can see here it already shows me, even though I didn't press enter yet. So if I do JSON parse of S, I get the object parsed from this string. So now I could say, for example, my object is equal to JSON parse s, and I could say access the clothes or something, or the second item of the clothes array. So this is quite useful. Again, remember this thing what we talked before, hypertext transfer protocol. So the point of this is to be able to transfer objects into text, to be sent to server in a standard format, and for when the server gives you back some text, hopefully also in the same format, it should, then you can get it back as an object with this parse method. And if I'm going to modify this object here, say, I'm going to say the name is going to be equal to that. Oh, sorry. Like that. Then now my object is going to have the updated name here, but I could use the second function available in JavaScript here, which is called Stringify. So this Stringify function takes the object as a parameter and outputs to you a new string with its properties. So these two functions, JSON Stringify and JSON parse, they are how you should send data from your app to the server and back, because it's a standard format, it's a textual format that allows you to send complex data to the server and receive complex data from the server. And I recommend you use post most of the time because it tends to become quite large. You may start to have these length restrictions, and sometimes you may have security concerns as well. And yes, it stands for JavaScript Object Notation, so we don't have to implement ourselves any kind of parser for this format and back. And since I'm going to teach the app development in web, it's easy. Can somebody tell me other formats that can be used to serialize data?
XML.
Yeah, XML. So XML is equivalent, more or less. It could be used with the same purpose. I actually don't know any others, but you could define your own. The most important thing is just that you and your server should talk the same language, should expect the same format to come. And of course, it's good to use standards because you don't want to invent your own format and then teach it to everybody new you want to work with. So you want to use something that exists, and this is a big issue. Maybe not so big anymore nowadays because you guys seem to know what JSON is in my feedback that you completed in the beginning. But when I started to do web programming, everybody was just sending any kind of data in any format they invent, and then they would split it on the server manually. Every request would have a different separator or whatever, and simple things like sending data from one place to another would have made you have to concentrate very much to understand what is happening there. So do use something like this. Now, I'm going to start to write some code soon, but before that I'm going to say that we will check out some APIs that offer location-based data in one way or another today in class. And these APIs are going to be something from Google. This open weather map, and we in Mopsy have also some kind of APIs that you can use. This OSRM is something quite useful. So OSRM stands for open source routing machine. It's a service that lets you call it to get directions from A to B. So it's that thing that you use when you use, for example, Waze application or Google Maps application or whatever navigator you use in your car. You are at one location, it knows your location through GPS, and you want to go to some specific destination. Well, this routing machine is an open source application for that. You can call it directly on their website, but they have limited calls, like a limited number of calls are available, but you can actually install it on your own server. So if you have a server for this, it's C++ code. You can look at how it's implemented. It's not easy. Complicated stuff there. But more or less it's application of shortest path calculation in graphs. So you have a graph, the road network of a city or the world or whatever, and you just want to find which roads to take to go from A to B. And this application can give it to you. It's open source, but it needs another thing to run. It needs the map. So this application doesn't come with a map. You have to give it one. And what we have done inside Mopsy, we have installed it, and we have also installed the OpenStreetMap database. So using OSRM with OSM, OpenStreetMap, you can have a fully functional routing system implemented on your own server, which is quite nice because you don't have any limitations to how many calls you can do, which is more or less the thing that is going to happen with Yahoo, Apple, Google, Bing Maps, if you want to use their server and their service instead. And finally, Overpass API is something also related to OpenStreetMap data, but it lets you query more, not just streets, but other things, like maybe restaurants in the area, for example. Okay, but before we get into this, I just want to make sure that you know how these how the HTTP works and how we call a server and how we get response and so on. So that's what we are going to implement now, and after that we will start to talk about these specific applications, so to get more complicated type of data. Maybe we have a 10-minute break now, actually. We continue, and I'm going to go now to demos. APIs and own server HTML. Okay. And this is going to be an empty file here. So I'm going to put the code in to do something. And the code that we are going to do today is going to do something extremely complicated. It's going to add numbers and subtract numbers. So it's going to do just two things. It's going to add two numbers and subtract two numbers. And that's it. But I'm not going to do it on my computer. I'm going to do it on the CS server. So I'm not going to use plus or minus as addition and subtraction operations. Here I just want to demonstrate how you can talk to a server with what we have learned before. And I will show you what the server is going to do first. So this is some code that is already on the server. I don't write it because it would take too long to finish today everything. But more or less is going to check if it receives anything from the post or from the get parameter. So this is going to be an API that works with both post and get. Because I'm checking it for post, and if it's empty, I'm gonna try to see what is in the get method as well. So it's gonna work for both requests. Then I have a class here, and I call from this class this process JSON request. So I'm going to expect some kind of JSON parameter, JSON value going to the API. And this JSON string should be part of an attribute called param here. Now, after this is going to execute the process JSON request, it decodes the JSON. So this is very similar to what we have seen in JavaScript as the JSON parse. But in PHP, you already see it's called differently. It's called JSON decode. If you're going to use a different programming language, most likely it's going to have a different name. And very likely it's not going to be a method natively available in the language. You may have to download first a JSON parsing library or something like that. But if you're going to do JavaScript implementation like a web app, then these you can just call anytime. The request is going to check what should it do first. So I will specify the request type as one JSON attribute. If it's add numbers, it's going to do something. If it's subtract numbers, it's going to do something else. If it's none of those, then I'm going to give some kind of warning. So the client sees, hey, I don't know to do what you are asking me to do. The add and subtract numbers are actually going to do the addition and the subtraction, but I'm not going to do it on the client side. So the client will rely on the almighty CS server for this operation. Okay.
One question.
Yes.
About in the function you have a silent parameter.
I have
Silent parameter.
silent parameter.
A parameter named silent.
I do.
It's about. Yeah. Yeah. Return this process request. Yeah.
Yes.
While
I fixed it. I probably copied this code from elsewhere, so usually if I use this type of parameter, it means that I want to I don't want to debug, or maybe I want to debug something. So it's some kind of parameter that I pass down to maybe report additional information if I want to debug something specifically. But here it's a mistake. It shouldn't be there. Okay, so this server PHP function that I have here exists, and if I were to write here a link that goes to where the code is, which is in PHP and then /server.php, I'm gonna get unknown operation because this text that I wrote here on the top doesn't have any get or post attributes in it. But if I'm going to write a question mark and I'm going to set this param attribute equal to some JSON text, now I'm going to copy this here because you have a better chance of reading it. So if my JSON is going to be request type equal to, well, I think it's this column actually, add numbers, and then I have here in the server code, I see that the first number has to be in attribute A and the second number has to be in attribute B. So if I go back to my URL and say A equal to 10 and B equal to 20, now pasting this as the URL here, it's going to give me 30 because now the server recognized the add numbers request type. It recognizes the value of the A parameter and the B parameter. So this is the GET request. Now, how to get it into code, into JavaScript? I'm also going to show you some code for this because it takes longer time to write it, and I just don't want to spend the time for it. Now, here, JavaScript function for doing a GET request to a given URL looks like this. This function is going to call the given URL, give it, well, it already has the parameters because it's a GET in this case, and it's going to return whatever the server gives you. So in this case, it would return to me this text from here. But this function as it is, it's deprecated. So deprecated means you shouldn't use this function. It's probably going to disappear at some point, or it has some bad things associated to it. And the bad things associated to it is that if you're going to ask the server to give you something, but the server will take time to calculate this something, maybe 1 minute, then the whole web page stops. It hangs. You cannot click other buttons meanwhile. So instead of using this way of writing the GET request, this is commonly used nowadays. So this is called an asynchronous request. It looks pretty much the same. It will do a GET to the given URL, but it has also a callback function. So the difference is that after this request to the URL is sent, it's being sent, the interface is is free to move. It's not going to get stuck. This function actually doesn't return anything. It's in fact called a procedure, I think. So if you don't return anything, it's not a function. But when the result is available, it passes it to another function given as a parameter. So, we are going to use this function today. Let's see how that one works in this example file that is empty at the moment. So I'm just going to say here that. So I paste this function here, and yeah, I need to wait for the page to load. And when it loads, I'm going to have a main function. And this main function, it's going to do the exact same thing that I did here in the URL of the browser. So I'm going to copy this long URL from here. I'm going to use the single quotes, so it's that problem I mentioned before about the JSON notation. And I'm going to say HTTP get asynchronously the URL that is defined here. And a callback function, again, is a function that I'm going to pass it, and it has to do something with the result that comes from the server. So I could write it inline here. And I can maybe print in the console the result that comes from the server. So now if I run this code, saving the file and going to this location here, so own server HTML, I refresh the page, but first I open the console here because I'm expecting to get response from the server. So if I refresh the page now, I just get server 30. So this is response for the from the server because I gave this this GET request. It is possible to analyze what has happened here in the network tab of the browser. So if I open this network tab, under this field here, or you can put all if you want to see them. But if you have, for example, just images or media, then nothing appears here at the bottom. I'm not sure what XHR stands for. Maybe somebody knows. I don't. But here you actually see the request that is being carried out. So
XML HTTP request.
I'm sorry?
XML HTTP request.
XML HTTP request. Okay. So you can analyze the request, and you can see, for example, that yes, the parameter is given here, the request type is also given here, and the values are given there. So yeah, this is possible to do. And if you want to send a post request instead, the function looks quite similar, but you have another attribute that you have to worry about. So the URL will not contain any additional information in the post request. You have to send it here separately, this parameter information, like what numbers to add or what numbers to subtract. So I'm going to copy also this function in our code today. And in the main function, I'm also going to do an example call for the post request. The URL is going to be just where the code on the server is. And here I'm going to say HTTP post, also asynchronously, so this has also the deprecated variant. Try not to use that if you are coding. And here we need to give it data. So the data has to come separately, like additional data that we want to send to the URL has to be given separately. It's going to be similar type of data like here, but I need, I think, to serialize it as a JSON object. Let me think. I will just copy this first. I think that most likely this param has to stay. Somehow. Okay, let's try. So param has to stay, but then I should make an object from this JSON string. So this is actually an object already here. Let's just see if it works. And if it doesn't, we find out why. So this is also something that can be a bit confusing sometimes. Instead of adding numbers, let's do the other thing and subtract. And yeah, I'm going to save the file and refresh the page. And my console is here. It says unknown operation, so something is wrong there. Something is wrong there, but the addition still works. To find out what is wrong, we can look at the network tab again. Add numbers is the first one, subtract numbers is the second one. It doesn't contain any information here for some reason.
This network tab is in every browser, or you're using a specific browser for this?
This network it is possible to open it on every browser. At least I have tried on Firefox, Edge, and Chrome, but it may be called a little differently.
This one is Firefox. What are you using?
I am using Chrome. I am using Chrome in all the lessons. I started now Firefox to check if it's available here. So in Firefox, Yes, Firefox has also this network tab here, and the same. Was it XML?
HTTP request.
Maybe HTTP request. So I use the Chrome for various reasons. One is that I can. Okay, I don't know here how to zoom in and out and show you with bigger text. There are equivalent things in other browsers. I'm just more familiar with Chrome, so I use this during teaching. But here we have some problems. So let's see. It says unknown operation.
Can't we set it as a string?
Maybe that's the problem. Yes. So let me try to put here apostrophe there.
No, I mean instead of creating a data object, can we use it as a whole string like you did
In the GET request.
Yeah, same.
Yes, but it expects one parameter, like param. So
but I can use param is equal to this object. String as well.
yeah, but I think that if I name here this param,
No, not here. Like I'm saying data string contains the whole thing. That's after our URL actually. Like param is equal to that object.
here you mean?
About.
Sorry.
About. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like after the question mark, I copy the whole thing and send it as data.
I'm not sure it's going to work. We can try that. The thing
But
is,
this would work only with the get. It won't work with the post, right? The URL.
it will work with both because on my server I am expecting post or get information to come. So
No, I mean, but once you post on the URL, then that URL is, it is secure for the post, so it won't, it doesn't accept it over there. Get is not secure, so it accepts over there. So
I am.
I think
if you use the post method, then it will not accept it because post does not want things to be shown on the URL because of security reasons.
Yes, but I am not sending it part of the URL here. So the URL contains just the address where the script is. But
Yeah.
this data comes as additional piece of information to this send method here. So the URL is when opening the request is used when opening the request without the post parameters. Parameters are sent afterwards. So this should work, but okay. Once you do these kind of requests and they start to work, you never worry about how to make them again. So I don't remember exactly how.
we could remove the param property while we are posting
Entirely,
the-
you mean?
Yes. The param property and then just add that JSON into the data option.
Like this,
Yes.
as a string.
No, not object. As an object.
We can try, but I think that the code is going to look on the server for this param object anyway. So let's see. I'm gonna save it and refresh. It will work. Yeah, I just need to practice a little bit. This hasn't helped. So okay. I try one thing. I try first this. It doesn't even send the request anymore. Oh, there is an error. Cannot set property param of undefined because the value was undefined, and was an issue. Okay, doesn't work. And one more thing I want to try is this, but as a string here, a full string. Okay, still nothing.
It should be an object when we are defining data.
An object when sending the data.
No, when we are defining the data, you have defined it as an array. So
Yes.
It should be curly braces, that empty object, on line number 16.
Oh, this one. Yeah, maybe, but this is hard to say. I would expect this to work. I mean, both of them. JavaScript tolerates these things quite much. But let's try one more time also without this, and then we will see how we could debug on the server, for example. Okay, so it just doesn't work. It doesn't work no matter what I'm doing here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to investigate on the server to see what am I getting as a post.
That thing will work.
I'm sorry?
That thing will work if you use the URL. Like as you had it in the URL in GET request, just posted it in data.
Like this. So you want me to copy this,
Not the question mark.
not the question mark, and post it in data,
As a string.
like that.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh yeah. Yes, I need to use equal here, not this object value. I think you are correct. I should have listened to you already long time ago, but I couldn't follow. So I replace it with subtract numbers, just to see different result here. And I'm getting now -10 and 30. Yeah, sorry about that. It was hard to figure it out. So the difference now in this network tab is if I open the information here, where does it say about post? It says the request method was post to be used, and the first one is the get request. So it looks a little different, and you see here the request URL contains the information, but in the second one it doesn't. The information is sent separately.
Yeah.
And here what somebody, I think you mentioned before, so you can see that actually the URL is having these special characters there to compensate for things that shouldn't be part of the URL. So some automatic processing is happening there, even though many of us just take it for granted. Okay, good. So this is how you make more or less server-side communication and client-side communication. And I cannot share PHP files, because if I would send a PHP link to you, you would just execute the PHP. So this is a small issue. But I'm going to copy, just so you know how an example code looks on the server, I'm going to copy it in our file here and comment it out at the bottom. So it's just going to be example server code. And probably I need to remove this PHP, otherwise this comment will not escape it. It's quite powerful tag apparently. Okay, so this demo, like all others, is going to appear also on the page. Probably I'm going to put it here in the next few days. But this page now does nothing. So I mean, if you open it, you just see a blank page. So I'm going to display the output as text on the page, so people can actually see something when they open it. So to do that, in the body, I'm just going to open some. I'm gonna put a div. I call it output. And I'm going to fill it with the results when they are coming. So instead of printing to console, maybe I let both of them happen. But I'm going to say document get element by ID output. And there may be a function called append, but I am not sure. I'm not sure if it exists. We will try it. Sorry? Yeah. Inner HTML works, but I think append may also work. I want to try it, but let's see. I want that because otherwise I have to get the HTML, maybe concatenate something, and then work with it. But yeah, let's try append and see what happens. And I'm just going to append the result. Yeah, and I do exactly the same thing in the second function here. It actually works, but I have to say I never did this. Yeah, it seems like it just concatenates them to the inner HTML. It's useful. But you see, in coding, when you code, every time you see this kind of stuff, like now this function is doing exactly the same thing here, and exactly the same thing here. And if you wanted to more or less do something more sophisticated, then it's going to grow. And it's going to grow, and it's going to mean copying code from one place to another. And this is bad. It's going to make many lines of code and complications. So I would write here a new function. I would call it display output. And here I would just put it there. Maybe I also log it into the console so that the same behavior from before happens, and I can inspect it in the console as well. But here I would just say display output as the callback function, and on the top I would also say display output as the callback function. So reducing some lines of code and also making it more clear what is happening in that anonymous function there. So JavaScript lets us do all of these things. They can be very helpful sometimes, but it can be quite hard to read for people. And now it still works. But you see, this is now a JSON string coming from the server. I just want to know 10 and 30 here. So this is the moment when I'm taking this string from the server and I'm going to say JSON parse the result, and it's going to contain an object. So I'm going to take from this object only the value of the server attribute. I save the file and refresh the page, and now I get minus 1030. Okay, so not maybe the best situation here. Maybe it's nice to append also some line break. Of course, you can do much more sophisticated things, but Wow, interesting.
Banding.
Does it understand?
And NBSP on the first page.
I'm sorry?
Ampersand NBSP for space.
Okay. Interesting. It's very strange. I think this append function is just doing something I don't expect. So what I was suggested before by students here is to say inner HTML plus equals NBSP.
Yeah.
And now it does what I expect. So this append function does some kind of a strange extra thing there, and I don't use it, so I don't know exactly how it works. But okay, so now I'm getting -10 and 30, -10 and 30, and I'm refreshing all the time, hoping that at some point I'm going to get 30 minus 10 instead, because this can happen. And I'm not getting it, okay? I'm not getting it, but I can force it to happen. So this is -10 and 30. You would think it's like that because subtract numbers comes before add numbers, but it's not. Add numbers should actually be first. So the reason why this -10 is first here is, does anybody know? Okay.
That
The call is
call.
missing.
I'm sorry?
Due to calling post get.
We are making an asynchronous call.
We are making an asynchronous call, yes.
So it depends on the server when it requests to respond.
Yes, so if the server takes a longer time to do something, we will get the result later than the first one, even though they are called about the same time. I mean, this is like microseconds here. These calls are called almost at exactly the same time, but the response seems to consistently come for the second one for some strange reason. I don't know exactly why. But to simulate slow processor, I'm going to go into this subtract numbers, and I'm going to say here that. I don't know if it's gonna work. I never really tried this, but I'm gonna give it something else to do. It's gonna add up I 100,000 times. And now if I go back here, it isn't enough. It's too little. Maybe I try adding some more.
Get request is taking way more time.
Okay, 30 came. Aha, -10. Okay, so it took some time for -10 to appear. Maybe a little too long. I remove 1 0 from here. So now I have 30 there, and -10 comes a little later. So yes, good idea. So maybe the GET request actually gets processed. The GET request actually processed lower than the POST request.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
the
why.
network tab is showing their time, how much time it
Yes.
See the time. It's 7. Remove that loop and then
Yes, remove the loop.
23 and 11 something off.
Yeah, so if I remove the loop here, and 11. 24 and 11, 37 and 11, 38 and 11, and so on. So that GET request is a little bit more. The other one apparently is already formatted as an object or whatever, and the server is just doing it a little bit quicker than parsing the string or something like that.
Post request just append the data along with form and send it. And get request append query string
The
in
string.
URL and that it.
Yeah, of course this doesn't really make a big difference in practice because like what is this amount? And usually people don't send like billions of requests one after the other to do something. They send all they want to do with one request. So this is going to be negligible, few milliseconds, but it's something. And anyway, this experimentation here, I'm actually going to leave it because I find it interesting. Like, so in this way, you can see that even though you're calling a function, the response for it may come a little bit after you get the response of another function called afterwards. Okay, so I'm playing now with very, very basic things here, but I think that many people have trouble understanding these, and if you start to implement a real project and some of these things are not totally understood, then you're asking, I don't know why it doesn't work. I call this, result should be here, and I think it's nice to play with these simple behaviors a little bit. Okay, and now we move to a more complicated example, and I'm not going to explain this other example in the same manner. I'm just going to put all the code there, and we will look at it to see what it's doing. First, I'm going to run the file to show you what it's doing. Many, many things. First, the same addition that we are familiar with now. Then it loads a trajectory file from the server. So it loads it into memory, a GPS trajectory file. It takes some points, it calculates the convex hull for those points. So I'm not sure if you know what the convex hull is, but okay. So the convex hull for a set of points is, if this is the set of points, then the convex hull looks something like this. So it's like a border around the points. It's like a border around the points, but the border is convex. Convex means that, well, it means it doesn't hold water in any circumstance. So this is a concave polygon because there would be water here. If you want.
Concave, yeah. Like
Yeah.
mirror, convex mirror. And
Convex mirror,
Yeah.
okay. Are you from physics or something? Okay.
So the angle, the internal angles are less than, in convex, the internal angles are less than 180 degrees. All of them.
Very good also, yes. So this angle here is more than 180 degrees.
So that's why it's concave.
Exactly. So this is why it's concave. I gave the intuitive definition first, but if you wouldn't have told me about this, I probably would have forgotten to say it, so thanks. Okay, yes, so it is calculating this. It's our own MOPSI server that is doing it. I will show you soon enough. It also tells me the weather in Kuopio, and apparently it's cloudy. It also gives me for some set of points the traveling salesman path. So how to connect these points as short as possible. It also gives me a list of all the pubs between Joensuu and Kuopio. So the name of the pubs and their locations. So these are Overpass queries to Overpass system, which uses OpenStreetMap. Yeah, very interesting set of bars here. This Hoyo Hoyo is midway in Tuusniemi. Anyway, for that route, that trajectory that I loaded in the beginning, it tells me what transportation mode was used in it. So it was changing from walking to bicycle to stopping to walking to bicycle. Just that. And this one tells me time zone and the name of the location at these given coordinates. So it happens to be Tuusniemi again. So all this code is in this new example that we have here. I'm not going to go very much in depth in it, but a little bit I explain so that you can study it later. So HTTP handler class, I wanted to separate here, so it's probably first example when I'm separating the get and post requests. So these are the things that we wrote before. I want them to be out of the way and in another file. So this is what happens here. And this examples.js, so this examples.js is doing everything. It has on the top here some coordinates that it's going to work with. And here is information about how to connect to different servers. The one for adding and subtracting numbers that we built before. But these are servers offered by Google, servers offered by OpenWeatherMap, by OSRM. The Overpass server we actually installed on our inside of Mopsy somewhere because it doesn't offer this kind of API request directly. The transportation mode detection API is something available in Mopsy. So it's the thing that if you give it a trajectory like this one, so all these coordinates here, if you give these coordinates to the API, it's going to give you this list of transportation modes. So I am just writing here the type of the transportation, but here in this page I'm also visualizing on the map. So it's a little nicer interface there. Okay. And this points server is from OMopsy, so this is the one that gives me the convex hole and the traveling salesman path between a set of points. Those points are here, so they are hard-coded. There is no special thing. And the trajectory that I am reading from the file is here in input-output directory. So it is just a set of latitudes, longitudes, and timestamp in milliseconds. Number of milliseconds that passed since 1st of January 1970, which is how Unix timestamp is defined. Okay, but if we look what is happening here, so I'm going to add numbers, presumably using the Lamat API, getting the Google time zone at Tuusniemi location, checking the weather, and I can give it here actually even the name of the city, not just coordinates. So API actually works with both, but I wanted to demonstrate how to get directions from Tuusniemi to Kuopio. This is also something that should be here, but I didn't see it. Maybe there's some error. And then convex hole of the set of points, TSP, and Overpass query, I wanted to give example here. Overpass requests XML instead of JSON format. I think it can be used with JSON format as well, but I wanted to give an example where XML is used instead, so that you can see somehow differences. Now, the add numbers function, it looks very much like what we wrote today in class. I should have probably copied it from here because this one works. So it does have the param equals here. And then I stringify this object. I could have done that. The other things will look very similar to this. They are just different types, preparing different type of data to be sent via GET or POST requests depending on what the APIs offer. So geocoding is with GET request. Geocoding gives you, given a latitude and longitude, it will give you the address, the human readable address information. The weather goes here as a GET request. When it's completed, it's going to write it down. Okay, so more or less everything looks the same. Preparing data how the API expects it, sends it, and then reads the result, whatever the server gives as the output, and parses it in some way. Like here, convex hull, bold, column, and then the result on a new line. It's more or less what you see here, and I'm just adding it to the inner HTML. But how do I know to call these things? I need to look at the documentation. So this is, all of these APIs are going to offer documentation, like how to call it, what services they offer. For example, the weather API can give you location at the moment, but maybe it can give you location a day ago, or maybe it can even predict the location in the future. Some of these things may be free. The weather now at least is free, but okay, I haven't been here for a long time, but I guess I would go to this API section. Okay, so current weather data, API documentation. Data is available in JSON, XML, or HTML format. So most of them will work with JSON. This one has more formats as well. Forecast and all the other things. Okay, available for free and all other paid accounts. The forecast is available for developer, professional, and enterprise accounts. So some limitations on some of the things, and you can get even more things like bulk downloading, 5-day, 3-hour forecast, or just download very much historical data in bulk. Okay, we can look at one more just as an example. Maybe let's find out why this OSRM doesn't work. I didn't get directions in the page here. Oh, okay. Okay, I tested this code before, probably too much. The server gives me a message, it's telling me too many requests. If I would make some kind of hotspot on my phone, but I don't have my phone, and if I would connect this computer to my phone hotspot, I would have a different IP, and then probably this would start to work again. So I can't demonstrate, but the request is really limited. So it doesn't offer an amazing number of them. But what we can do in practice, and what we did in Mopsy, we have installed the service on our own computer on the CS server, and we can actually call it as many times as we want. Okay, maybe I should go. Okay. Maybe I should go in Finland first. So the reason I want to go to Finland is because we have this service installed. It should work everywhere, but we downloaded the roads from OpenStreetMap only in Finland because we don't have enough space for to waste for the whole world, assuming that we don't really have much data elsewhere than in Finland for this particular thing. So the directions from OSRM look something like that. So we have installed it on Mopsy server, and if you will ever need to use it in your projects, just ask me the URL from there. So you won't have to call this service directly, but you can call it through Mopsy, and you can even get differences like walking directions here or bicycle directions. You could see it changes a little bit. Or car, it changes even more significantly to use more roads. So this is these are all APIs that you can check, you can look at, and usually you can use for free, but these are some things that I have to point out.
Yeah.
API keys. You may need to make an account to open Weather Map, a Google account or something, and set up a developer key. Usually this is free, and it has been free for all these things here until last year. But Google recently started to ask you for credit card information.
Yeah.
So the thing is that it's a trick somewhat. They ask you for credit card information, you put it there, and then you get an account. And when you get this account, it tells you you have a
Balance.
Yeah, a balance, like 200 euros, always replenishes every month. So if you don't call as much as it would take 200 euros, you are fine. But if you go more, you are not fine. And I mean, if you, for example, make an application, and let's say that you're testing your application and you do maybe 20 geocoding requests every day, it's not going to fill this quota. You will never have to pay anything for Google Maps because you're just testing it, you're just playing around with it. But if you publish it and maybe it becomes successful, and tomorrow you notice, oh my God, 1 million users, and they are using my application, then you will go over this margin for sure.
Yeah.
So I believe that their strategy was, let's have people have their credit card here just in case, because maybe this happens and we get some money. This is my personal opinion why they did it. But before that, they had just, you make an account and we give you the key without credit card or any kind of information. I have to say that a Google account like this I made last year for Lamad course, and it was after this credit card thing. You can go there and put limits so that you never exceed these limits. Like also on your phone you can say I don't want to use too many megabytes of internet or something like that. So what I did, I set those limits, and then all the Lamad students used my key. They were worried about these settings or whatever. And even with all the Lamad students doing API requests to these different services, I never reached to the top. So there is a margin of safety there, but just be cautious. And this one, like the weather service, doesn't ask for a key, and we don't in the MOPSI services, and OSRM doesn't need a key, but it will give you like 10 requests per day, which is like very, very little. So okay, but anyway, so when thinking about what project you make, think about these APIs. You can check others. There are many, many things that you can try. You can try to find. And think about using them, because they are easy ways to make your application do interesting things. You are making here some applications that don't necessarily become commercial, but maybe they would. And in that case, you should also think about what are the limitations of using these APIs. Like, for one application to be profitable, is it worth to actually purchase an account so that I have more requests from Google, or more requests for weather or whatever? So these kind of questions, what is it worth, what is not worth, is something that you would need to think if you're ever serious about making real apps nowadays. Because we are living in a time when you can't really make amazing applications without using APIs, unless it's some maybe game or something like this. But now it's all about data, and you can't have data on your phone too much. You need to get it from elsewhere, or keep it on a server at least. So yeah, okay, but thanks, and if you have questions, then